Today marks a sad day in the world of professional wrestling, as Hussein Khosrow Ali Vaziri, better known to wrestling fans all over the world as the Iron Sheik, passed away at the age of 81. And given the numerous hardships that he suffered earlier in his life, the struggles that he went through just to come to the U.S., break into professional wrestling with his legit background, the fact that he was so goddamn gifted as an amateur wrestler, so tough, and the fact that he embraced any and all fans that tried to come at him because no fan could take him. He was so tough. The Persian Club Challenge, the heel-toed boots, the fact that he would just go for broke, he would go for blood, he would go for violence. He did not care. And he, of course, would break your back, make you humble with the camel clutch. He said, fuck the Hulk Hogan, years before Randy Savage did. And, of course, he said, Iran, #1, USA, pooey. And even with the issues that would develop in his life and his career later on, he was still married to the same woman, raised children, and he was able to tell his story before he passed away. So let's talk about some of the moments from the Iron Sheik's career and life. I'm John Rentham with my tribute to the Iron Sheik. Yes, Hussein Khosrow Ali Vaziri. That's a life well lived, and the stuff that he overcame, it's a goddamn miracle that he lived to 81. WWE biography had the Iron Sheik tell his story, and a lot of things were said there, and I reviewed that, and I talked about a lot of that stuff. So I'll mention a few things here, but I'm also going to talk about some of my favorite memories of the Iron Sheik, even though a lot of the stuff that he did was before my time, and I've had to go back and watch clips on YouTube and see other stuff, but so gifted, so feared, so tough, and to think he got into wrestling pretty late. I mean, he was about 30 when he got into wrestling. And a lot of people get into wrestling when they're teenagers, early 20s, and his toughness was world class. I mean, he started out as an amateur wrestler and then embraced the heel persona, going through a few name changes before going with the Iron Sheik name. And by the time he beat Bob Backlund, he was over 40. And he would feud with Hogan, Slaughter, all that stuff. It is definitely a sad time. I don't know if it's necessarily shocking, given the various drugs and the various issues that he had, issues that he overcame. I'm not knocking. But he talked about that stuff. That stuff's been told in other interviews and other documentaries. It is a modern miracle that he lived this long. It's great that he did, though. He was born March 15th, 1942. As Hussein Khosrow Ali Vaziri. He looked up to Takhti, I believe that's how the name is said, Iranian Olympic gold wrestler who spoke up against the Shah. And that ended up leading to the end of his life because of the rule in Iran. And, Khosrow became a big deal as far as amateur wrestling. Competed for a spot in the Olympic Games in 1968. He went to the U.S. in the very early 70s, probably thinking right after Takhti died, like, okay, if they're going to get him, they probably could get me, so let me escape. And he ended up, rising up in wrestling. He was an assistant coach for the Olympic Games in Munich in 1972. He, because of his amateur background, naturally Vern Gagne would absolutely take to him because Vern liked real athletes, and it worked. And you look at the early footage of him. He had hair, had the washboard abs. He was thinner, and he didn't even really blow up in weight until like 86, 87, if you think about it. But he was in incredible shape, could do some great shit. You see that old footage of him. Sure, I'm not even going to say he was bland, but he was just a clear-cut, amateur wrestler that loved America. He's an Olympic wrestler, all that. So people took to him, but he needed something else because you can be a really good wrestler, but that will only take you so far. And then we get to the Iranian conflicts, and we get to all that and everything, the Iranian hostage situation. And he changed his look, shaved his head, got the mustache and everything, and had the flag with the Shah painted on it that Jerry Lawler apparently painted. And just all the rage that the fans would have. And he didn't care. Sheik's like, I don't care. Like, I think somebody was like, some people were like, oh, well, we're going to have a whole bunch of... He's like, oh, you worry too much. It's fine. It's fine. I take care of myself. And he was, he went through other names like the Great Hussein Arab. He had stints in Texas. Naturally, you could see why Fritz von Erich would like him. Paul Bosch would no doubt like him. He had stints in Georgia, Japan, WWF. In Japan, he wrestled Inoki. He would also, in his first stint in the WWF in 79 and 80, he would wrestle Backlund, unsuccessfully trying to unseat him as champion. Chief Jay Strongbow, Bruno Sammartino. And then he would have a Carolinas run. He settled on the Iron Sheik name around this time and won the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championship. He would, I believe, he feuded with just various people. I mean, Blackjack Mulligan, various others. He left in 1981. He had stints in Mid-South and Florida. He would bop in and out of Mid-South. Florida, I think, lasted a month. Which is a bit surprising. You would actually think that Eddie Graham could have gotten some more out of him, but maybe he just got a better offer elsewhere. I don't know as much about it, but it's like, obviously, looking at how he was developing this character at this point, he, whether it's studio wrestling, whether it's in the arenas, he could cut the promos. He could get people hot at him. When he wrestled in Memphis, he'd get people hot at him. Jimmy Hart even mentioned in the WWE biography, like, God, baby, we're gonna get killed. No, and I mean, I love Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart is like 80 and still has all that energy. But Sheik, all this time, I mean, you think it by 1982, he's 40. He's 40. And I mean, he's been in wrestling for 10 years, had that life that he had, developing the character, doing this stuff. The stint in WWF before really set him off on something. It's a big run. He won the NWA TV Championship in Georgia, and he left in the summer of 83. I believe he wrestled Ron Garvin and various other people. And naturally, you can see why the Georgia fans would not only hate him, but would respect him and probably want to stay the fuck away from him because it's like, oh yeah, he could fucking kill you. He really could. He really fucking could. He married his wife sometime in the mid-70s, I believe. And they ended up having 3 kids, and unfortunately, yes, one of the children ended up being killed. The daughters, and she could have killed him. Could have been heartbeat, even in his condition. Guy deserved to be executed, by the way, horribly, violently, in front of his own family, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not talking about Sheik. I'm talking about the person that murdered Sheik's daughter. So, anyway, he returns to the WWF because Vince remembered Sheik and wanted Sheik to be the guy to take it from Backlund, because Vince, by this point, had bought the company from his dad like a year or so prior. And Backlund, he appreciated Backlund. Now, this whole thing with Jimmy Snuka blew up because Jimmy Snuka was, murdering son of a bitch that murdered Nancy Argentino and abused his other wife and did all that. Sheik, however, had no issues. I mean, issues that would develop later on, as far as drug issues. No abuse. But he was, he was the perfect guy to beat Backlund because Arnold Skolin throwing in the towel. This is a big deal because you look at the fact that the WWF, besides Superstar Billy Graham, always had transitional heavyweight champions. I mean, you had Buddy Rogers, and you had Bruno beat him. And then you had Ivan Koloff beat Bruno, and that went to Pedro Morales. And you had Stan Stasiak beat Pedro just for a few days, and that went back to Bruno. And then you had Superstar Billy Graham, who was supposed to have a lengthy run, but only had a 9.5-month run. And then Backlund won. And Sheik being the guy to beat Backlund was a big goddamn deal, because people knew about the Sheik, those who were doing early tape trading, and those that had maybe remembered his brief run in the WWF, because there were lifelong fans at that time. They would remember him, and if they had the crossover appeal as far as the Carolina stuff, there wasn't as much cable overlay, obviously, at that point. It was starting to develop, but nevertheless, Sheik was the perfect guy to do it. And he would wrestle Tito Santana. He wouldn't really wrestle necessarily a lot of big talents. I mean, he would wrestle Backlund on the house shows. He wrestled Tito, who's a big star that came from the AWA. But he would generally not have the biggest competition. And then, of course, was the guy to drop the title to Hulk Hogan in 1984. But one thing that people tend to forget about Sheik is loyalty. Now, Sheik appreciated what Verne Gagne did for him, and he told the story. Slaughter told the story on the Legends of Wrestling Roundtable, where he said, The coach, and Sheik has talked about this in some interviews, but he said the coach, Vern Gagne, offered me, $100,000, break Hogan's leg, take title to AWA. 100 grand's a lot of money. Sheik at this point was told not to. Went and talked to Vince, all that stuff. Everything went good. He was the perfect guy to drop it to Hogan. It worked. It worked like magic. Hogan was launched, and Sheik was a name. Sheik was a big name. Sheik also, at this point, was approaching 42. And still could go in the ring. But the issues are starting to take hold. The issues were definitely starting to take hold. However, he could anger people with his promos. He went right into a feud with Slaughter. And, I mean, he would still wrestle Hogan on some of the house shows, but Slaughter and Sheik was the big feud because you had Slaughter turn babyface. There's a lengthy Allentown taping. I think the way Slaughter told it, he went out for the first hour as a heel. Sheik did what he did. He beat up some guy, and then in the third hour, Slaughter came out and helped and, rescued him. And then cut that passion promo and stuff like that, and it was a big deal for Sheik. Because it gave Sheik a new shot in the arm, so to speak, and it gave Slaughter a shot in the arm because it's the Iranian against the U.S., the turn good guy, Mr. G.I. Joe himself, not quite G.I. Joe yet, Sergeant Slaughter. Boot camp rules match, great stuff. Sheik always could bring it, but then it was obvious by late 84, early 85, especially after Slaughter had left because of the G.I. Joe deal and the fact that LJN was doing the toys for WWF. Slaughter was going to become the first living G.I. Joe. He left. It's a shame they couldn't work that shit out. But Sheik was getting checks for like 60 to 80 grand a quarter. That's not even a year. He was getting big-ass money. A lot of goddamn money. Because he was part of that initial run. So the checks were bigger. It wasn't all spread out. And Sheik was still, but he was part of the cartoon, the Rock and Wrestling Connection, overlay as well. He was part of the first WrestleMania title change. Him and Nikolai Volkov against the U.S. Express, Mike Rotunda and Barry Windham. Sheik cracking, I believe, was it Windham? It was Windham or Rotunda. It was one of the two. Sorry, it's been a lot of shit in my head. But the bottom line is Sheik and Volkov won the tag team championships. And Fred Blassie, of course, as Ayatollah Blassie was in the corner with Iron Sheik at this point. And Blassie was just having a goddamn, blast, see, as it were. He was just, he didn't have any fear either. He looked like he was just partying all the goddamn time. Because he loved being a villain. Look at the stuff that he did in L.A., if any of that footage exists. There's stuff back in the 50s. Blassie didn't give a fuck, and he was perfect to manage Iron Sheik. And Iron Sheik, of course, during all this time, didn't matter whether he was in the WWF or the WWF or Georgia or whatever, he would do the Persian club stuff. He would pick it up, and it wasn't just the heaviness. It was a technique. Very few others could even do it. Strong people that had the mobility, couldn't do it. Sheik figured out how to do it. Now then, of course, later on, as he got older, they couldn't do it as much anymore. But the Mania 1 title win was pretty much the apex of it. Now, him and Nikolai, would have a run for a bit. And then unfortunately, by 87, he would be feuding with Duggan. The Jersey Turnpike thing where they were arrested, being in the same car with a bunch of drugs. Duggan would leave for a bit, come back, be a big star. Iron Sheik would bop in and out, but by this point, his drug issues had taken hold. He would have stints in World Class, in AWA, in Puerto Rico. He was actually there the same show that Bruiser Brody was killed. I believe he faced Tony Atlas, and Tony Atlas said that, Jose Gonzalez did. And Sheik got up and it's like Jose Gonzalez motherfucker killed the King Kong of Brody. Or stabbed the King Kong of Brody, and so he went after him. Because Sheik didn't care, even though he's approaching his mid-40s or above his mid-40s. And then he went to WCW. George Scott thought, okay, yeah, we're bringing the Iron Sheik back. The problem is the Sheik was also was about 47 when he got brought back, or just about. And he was not in good shape. I mean, you take a look at Sheik even in 86, and you take a look at Sheik in 89. It's astonishing. Cocaine, crack, various drugs. Various drugs. The drinking, that kind of stuff, it got to the point where the partying lifestyle and the party favors and all that was catching up with him. He was still the Sheik. He still had a name. He didn't have the ability to back it up, though. He was paid $100,000 for 1 year, and then the contract rolled over, and he was paid another $100,000. I think he worked on TV maybe 4 months out of those 2 years. 4, maybe 6 months. Regardless, he didn't work nearly enough to justify the $200,000, but that was WCW's management for you. And then he returns as Colonel Mustafa. I don't know why they didn't call him the Iron Sheik. I don't understand that at all. I don't understand that. It's like when they had Tony Atlas be Saba Simba. And Sheik, by this point, I mean, he was almost 50. He teamed up with, General Adnan Sheik, Adnan El Casey in the AWA. They had one of Verne Gagne's last matches, believe it or not. And they were part of the Triangle of Terror at SummerSlam 91. He was going to break Warrior's leg for being, piece of shit and a goddamn moron and everything, and wanting more money from Vince when he was already getting paid more fucking money than, he ever fucking goddamn deserved. And yeah, Warrior was a big star for a brief moment in time. He became a legend in his own mind. Just had to get the little shot in there about Warrior. But Sheik, by this point, Colonel Mustafa, I believe he was in the 92 Rumble. He was in the company for a little bit longer. And then from there, he'd have various stints. The UWFI didn't really work out all that well. He would return, hurting for money. While his marriage is still going, and while he's raising his 3 kids and stuff like that, he returned as a manager for the Sultan, who was Rikishi, Fatu, under a mask. Everybody fucking knew it, and they couldn't really hide it, but nevertheless, it was Sheik and Mr. Backlund. 96, 97 television WWF was a bit weird. And that didn't last more than maybe a year. About that. He then, unfortunately, would be part of the ill-fated Heroes of Wrestling 99 show. I revisited that and redid that, and I cannot believe that I somehow survived with my sanity. But then again, Sheik was not even the most egregiously out of shape individual there. He would have various appearances and matches, including WrestleMania 17, where Bobby Heenan said the iconic line, "By the time the Iron Sheik gets to the ring, it'll be WrestleMania 38. And he couldn't go over the top rope because he was frail. Like, they could have put him over the rope and pushed him down, but no, they had Sheik win the thing and then Slaughter laid him out with the Cobra Clutch. And then he had the great Hall of Fame induction, where he would just, he was the life of the party there. It was great. It was a great Hall of Fame class, by the way. Great Hall of Fame class. He was just overjoyed, energetic. By this point, he was doing shoot interviews, and he was doing stuff as a fuck the Hulk Hogan and all that, and breaking the back, making you humble. We got the Sheik picture, or film that came out a few years ago that was about, from a couple of guys that were, buddies of his. I don't know. The people writing his Twitter, they didn't exactly seem like the best guys, at least in my opinion. So Sheik suffered some hardships. Finally had to get clean from drugs. His wife had actually left him for a bit because she couldn't take it anymore. And then he got clean. They stayed together. And then we had the WWE biography episode, and it would be impossible to cover the entire length of the Iron Sheik's career and life without including various pieces of footage and getting flagged for all that. But just knowing how tough he was, seeing how tough he was, and even into his 40s, and at least his early 40s, still being able to go in the ring, still being able to do stuff. You just have to wonder, would he have been able to continue to wrestle into his 50s, regularly without the issues? Possibly. But honestly, he wrestled a hard style. He was broken down. He was beat up. I mean, it's a miracle. Even drug issues over here, even if those never happened, that he was able to walk by 50 because of the hard bumps and everything and all that stuff that he took. But the Iron Sheik left a hell of a goddamn legacy. 81 years old, lived hell of a goddamn hard life. And his wife and his 2 remaining children can carry on his legacy. And rest in peace, Sheik. Rest in peace, Sheiky. Of course, whenever he failed when he failed the first drug test, Vince told him, and Michael Hayes said this story, "You're positive." "Yes, I knew it. Sheik's always positive." "No, Sheik, this is bad." It's like, "No, positive is bad." "Yes, positive." And Sheik was one of a kind. There will never be another Iron Sheik. Share your favorite Iron Sheik moments in the comments. Rest in peace, Sheik. You'll be sorely missed.